It was a brisk autumn evening in Washington, D.C., when Congressman Adam Rourke took the stage. The large crowd gathered outside the Capitol building greeted him with applause, cameras flashing in every direction. Rourke, with his tailored navy suit and graying temples, embodied the kind of classic, all-American politician that voters loved. His speeches were always powerful, his smile confident, and his reputation spotless, or so it seemed. Rourke had built his career on being a family man with deep community ties, a man who stood for traditional values. With his wife, Margaret, and their two children by his side, his political image was one of stability and trustworthiness. He was the face of hard work and moral integrity, which made him a darling of the media and a favorite on the campaign trail. Behind that polished exterior, however, lurked secrets that had the power to destroy him. Lily Carson was a rising star in the political world. A 28-year-old campaign worker, she had the energy and drive that made her invaluable on the campaign trail. Lily was smart, passionate, and good at reading people. She believed in Congressman Rourke's vision and saw him as someone who could make a real difference in the country. To Lily, working with him was a dream come true. Her first meeting with Rourke had been entirely professional. She was assigned to coordinate his travel for a series of campaign events. The congressman was polite but distant, focused on his busy schedule. But over time, something shifted. It was at a campaign rally in the small town of Lexington, Virginia, when Lily first caught a glimpse of the man behind the politician. As the event ended, the congressman asked her to join him for a quick dinner with the campaign team. She agreed, flattered by the invitation. What started as a casual conversation about work turned into a deeper discussion about life, family, and ambition. The congressman spoke about the pressures of public life, how the weight of expectations sometimes felt suffocating. Lily listened, offering insights of her own, and for the first time, Rourke felt truly understood. Over the next few months, their relationship grew. They spent more time together, always under the pretense of work. But what had started as an innocent friendship became something much more complicated. Lily had never intended to fall for Congressman Rourke. She knew he was married and had a family, and she didn't want to be that person. But their connection was undeniable. He was magnetic, charming, intelligent, and attentive in a way that made her feel special. And for Adam Rourke, Lily was a breath of fresh air. She was young, vibrant, and full of life. She reignited a spark in him that had long faded in his marriage. Their affair was secret, of course. They met in quiet corners of hotel lobbies, away from the prying eyes of the press and public. Late-night phone calls and long text exchanges kept them connected, though the risk of exposure was always looming. Lily was careful not to let anyone in the campaign see the truth of their relationship, though a few of her close friends noticed her growing attachment to the congressman. She brushed off their concerns, reassuring them that it was just work, that the late nights and dinners were all part of the job. Rourke, on the other hand, was not as careful. His wife, Margaret, began to notice the changes. He came home later than usual, was more distant, and his phone seemed to always be in his hand. Margaret had been married to Adam long enough to know when something was wrong, but she didn't push it. Not yet. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when Margaret Rourke decided to confront her husband. She had spent months ignoring the growing tension between them, but the signs had become impossible to overlook. Adam's absences, his distracted demeanor, and the late-night phone calls were all too obvious to dismiss. Margaret wasn't naive. That night, after their children had gone to bed, Margaret waited for her husband in the living room. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the silence as she sipped her tea, her thoughts swirling. When Adam finally walked through the door, drenched from the downpour, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Adam, we need to talk." He froze, sensing the seriousness in her tone. He set his briefcase down and sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "What's going on?" Margaret asked, her voice steady but firm. Adam sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. He had prepared himself for this moment, knowing it was only a matter of time before Margaret would confront him. He had rehearsed the conversation in his head countless times, but now that it was happening, he found himself at a loss for words. "There's nothing going on, Margaret. You're overthinking things," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Don't lie to me, Adam," Margaret replied, her voice cracking slightly. I'm not a fool. You've been distant for months. You're always on your phone. You're barely home anymore. Who is she? The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of betrayal. Adam opened his mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. He couldn't lie to her anymore. Margaret's face fell as the silence stretched between them. Her worst fears had been confirmed. While Margaret's world was crumbling, another man was watching from the shadows. Tom Brennan, a longtime political strategist and Adam Rourke's closest advisor. Tom had been with Adam since the early days of his political career and had seen him rise from a local councilman to a congressman with national influence. But what few people knew was that Tom had always harbored feelings for Lily. Tom had noticed the subtle changes in Lily's demeanor around Adam, the way she smiled at him, the extra time she spent on his projects. It didn't take long for Tom to put the pieces together. He had seen enough affairs in politics to recognize the signs. But unlike most men in Tom's position, he didn't let it go. Tom's jealousy festered, turning into something far more dangerous than mere resentment. Lily wasn't just another campaign worker to him. She was someone he had grown to care for deeply, even though she never returned his feelings. To see her fall for Rourke, of all people, was unbearable. Tom started to gather evidence. He followed Adam and Lily, taking photos of them together when they thought no one was watching. He intercepted text messages and emails, building a case against Rourke that he could use if the time came. He had a plan to take Adam Rourke down and win Lily's heart in the process. Tom's opportunity came sooner than he expected. After a particularly long day of campaigning, Lily decided to unwind at a local bar frequented by the staff. She hadn't seen Adam in days, and the stress of keeping their relationship hidden was starting to take its toll. Tom found her there, sitting alone at a corner table, nursing a glass of wine. He saw his chance and approached her, his usual confident demeanor replaced with something more vulnerable. "Mind if I join you?" Tom asked, sliding into the seat across from her, without waiting for a response. Lily looked up, surprised to see him. She smiled weakly, gesturing to the empty seat. "Sure, why not?" For a while they made small talk, but Tom's mind was elsewhere. He couldn't shake the image of Adam and Lily together. The secret looks, the hushed conversations. It gnawed at him, and after a few drinks, his restraint crumbled. "I know about you and Adam," Tom said, his voice low and serious. Lily's eyes widened, her face draining of color. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Lily. I've seen the two of you. You think no one notices, but I do." Tom leaned in closer, his voice a harsh whisper. "He's using you, Lily, just like he uses everyone. He's not going to leave his wife for you." Lily's heart raced. She had feared this moment, the moment when someone would find out about her and Adam. But hearing it from Tom, someone she considered a friend, made it all the more real. "Tom, it's not what you think," Lily began, but he cut her off. "You deserve better than him, Lily. You deserve someone who actually cares about you, someone who's not afraid to show it." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She had never thought of Tom that way, but his words stung. She knew deep down that what she had with Adam wasn't sustainable, but she didn't want to admit it. Before she could respond, Tom stood up abruptly, his frustration boiling over. "You're making a mistake, Lily, and when this all blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you." With that, he stormed out of the bar, leaving Lily alone with her thoughts and the sinking realization that everything was about to unravel. Tom Brennan's warning wasn't an empty threat. A few days later, the scandal broke. An anonymous source leaked a series of photos and text messages to the press, revealing the affair between Congressman Adam Rourke and Lily Carson. The media pounced, plastering the story on every news outlet. The once respected congressman was now at the center of a scandal that threatened to end his career. Margaret Rourke, blindsided by the public revelation of her husband's infidelity, retreated from the spotlight, refusing to comment on the affair. The couple's children were kept out of the public eye, but the damage had already been done. Adam tried to control the narrative, issuing a statement expressing deep regret for his actions and apologizing to his family and supporters. But the public wasn't so easily swayed. The betrayal ran deep, and many of his most loyal supporters began to distance themselves from the disgraced politician. Lily, too, found herself at the center of a media firestorm. Her personal life was picked apart by reporters, and her reputation was shattered. Friends and colleagues turned their backs on her, and she became a pariah in the political world she had once dreamed of conquering. But the fallout didn't end there. Tom Brennan, the man who had set the scandal in motion, watched from the sidelines as Adam Rourke's world crumbled. He had gotten what he wanted, or so he thought. Adam's political career was in tatters, and Lily was no longer under his spell. But something unexpected happened. Rather than turning to Tom for comfort, as he had hoped, Lily cut him out of her life completely. She couldn't forgive him for betraying her trust, for exposing something so personal to the world. Tom had destroyed the man he hated, but in doing so, he had lost the woman he cared for. The realization hit him harder than he had anticipated. The emptiness that followed was suffocating. Adam, meanwhile, faced the consequences of his actions. His marriage was on the brink of collapse, and his political future was uncertain. His once adoring public had turned against him, and his supporters were calling for his resignation. The only thing left was the love of his children, who, though confused, still looked up to their father. Margaret, torn between the man she had loved for years and the betrayal she couldn't forget, struggled to figure out what to do next. She had always stood by Adam, but this time was different. This time the hurt ran too deep. As the weeks passed, the tension between Adam and Margaret grew unbearable. Their home, once a place of warmth and comfort, was now cold and silent. The couple barely spoke, and when they did, it was only about their children or the logistics of their crumbling life. One evening, in a final, desperate attempt to salvage what was left of their marriage, Adam suggested they go on a short vacation together. Just the two of them. It would be a chance to get away from the media frenzy and the constant scrutiny, a chance to reconnect. Margaret reluctantly agreed, though her heart wasn't in it. She packed her bags and followed her husband to a quiet cabin in the mountains, far away from the chaos of Washington. But the isolation only magnified the problems between them. What was meant to be a peaceful retreat quickly turned into a series of heated arguments. The trust that had once held their marriage together was gone, and no amount of time away could fix that. On the last night of their trip, the tension reached its breaking point. In the dead of night, after hours of fighting, Margaret made a decision. She couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't pretend that everything was okay, that they could somehow go back to the way things were. Without saying a word, she packed her bags and left. Adam woke up the next morning to find her gone. The silence in the cabin was deafening, and for the first time in his life, he felt completely and utterly alone. The fallout from the affair left scars that would never fully heal. Adam Rourke resigned from Congress a few months later, citing personal reasons. His political career was over, and his once bright future was reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. Lily Carson disappeared from the public eye, moving back to her hometown to escape the constant reminders of her past. She never fully recovered from the scandal, and the dreams she once had of making a difference in the political world faded into the background. Tom Brennan, the man who had set everything in motion, continued working in politics, though he was never quite the same. The bitterness that had driven him to destroy Adam Rourke lingered, but so did the guilt. He had won, but the victory felt hollow. Margaret Rourke, after months of soul-searching, decided to move on with her life. She filed for divorce, determined to start fresh and rebuild her life without the man who had betrayed her. And as for Adam, he spent the rest of his days trying to piece together what was left of his life. He had lost everything: his career, his marriage, and the respect of the people he had once represented. In the end, he was left with nothing but the memories of what could have been. The congressman's secret romance with his campaign worker had sparked a deadly feud, not one of violence, but of broken trust, shattered dreams, and lives forever changed by a single reckless decision. As Adam Rourke's resignation made headlines across the country, the public reaction was swift and brutal. Social media exploded with outrage, as once loyal supporters turned their anger towards the man they had trusted. News anchors, pundits, and late-night talk show hosts dissected every aspect of the scandal, each eager to capitalize on the downfall of yet another politician brought down by personal failings. Memes mocking Rourke's family values platform circulated widely, and his name became a trending topic for all the wrong reasons. But it wasn't just Adam who faced the public's wrath. Lily Carson, though less visible, became the subject of a different kind of scrutiny. In many ways, her role in the affair painted her as a villain in the eyes of the public, an opportunist who had climbed the ranks of the campaign only to manipulate the congressman for her own benefit. The misogynistic undertones of this narrative weren't lost on those who sympathized with her, but in the court of public opinion, nuance was in short supply. The backlash was relentless. Strangers sent Lily threatening messages, accusing her of ruining not just Rourke's career, but his family. Even her own family, once proud of her career ambitions, now struggled to support her in the face of such widespread condemnation. Her once bright future seemed to be collapsing in real time, with every headline driving her deeper into despair. Margaret, too, found herself unexpectedly in the spotlight. While some women praised her decision to leave her husband, others criticized her for not having seen the signs earlier. In interviews and opinion pieces, she was often portrayed as either the victim or the oblivious spouse, rarely anything in between. No matter what angle the media chose, Margaret became a symbol, a talking point for larger conversations about infidelity, forgiveness, and the cost of betrayal. While the media frenzy raged on, Adam Rourke was holed up in his family home, carefully avoiding the public eye. His once stately home was now a fortress of regret, where the phone rang incessantly with calls from reporters and former political allies, most of whom were eager to distance themselves from him. The walls that had once displayed his political achievements now felt like reminders of all he had lost. But the public wasn't done with Adam Rourke just yet. When news of Adam's affair first broke, many had assumed that it was purely a personal matter, albeit one with significant political consequences. However, as reporters continued to dig, whispers of deeper corruption began to surface. Some claimed that Rourke had used campaign funds to finance secret trips with Lily, while others speculated that the congressman had pulled strings to get her promoted within the campaign. These rumors sparked the interest of federal investigators, who were eager to determine whether any laws had been broken. The investigation launched by the Federal Election Commission (FEC) was just the beginning. Soon, the Department of Justice began its own inquiry into possible misuse of campaign funds. The media, sensing another scandal on the horizon, ran with the story, and suddenly Adam's affair was no longer the sole focus. Now he was facing the possibility of criminal charges. As the investigation progressed, more details came to light. While there was no concrete evidence that Rourke had directly funneled campaign money for personal use, there were suspicious expenses, hotel rooms, first-class flights, and lavish dinners, all charged to the campaign's credit card. Emails between Rourke and Lily, many of which had been leaked by an anonymous source, likely Tom Brennan, suggested that these trips had not been purely for political purposes. Facing the possibility of jail time, Adam found himself in a position he never thought he would be in, begging for mercy from a system he had once worked so hard to navigate. His legal team, which he could barely afford after his resignation, scrambled to present a defense, arguing that the congressman's actions had been careless but not criminal. But for the public, it didn't matter whether Adam was found guilty or not. The damage was done. His reputation was ruined, and no amount of legal maneuvering could restore the trust he had shattered. As the investigation unfolded and the media storm raged on, Lily Carson was desperately trying to reclaim some semblance of her former life. She had left Washington, D.C., hoping to find solace in her hometown. But even there, she couldn't escape the judgmental stares of people who recognized her from the news. Every trip to the grocery store, every walk through the park came with the unspoken accusation that she was somehow responsible for Adam Rourke's downfall. The weight of it all was overwhelming. Lily found herself replaying every moment of her relationship with Adam, wondering how she had let things spiral so far out of control. The affair had begun as something exciting, something that made her feel alive. But now it was a source of endless regret, a mistake that had cost her everything she had worked for. In the quiet of her parents' home, where she now stayed, Lily thought about the future. She had once dreamed of a long career in politics, of being part of a movement that would change the world. But now those dreams seemed unattainable. No one in the political world would hire her after this, and even if they did, she wasn't sure she had the energy to keep fighting. Her phone buzzed with a message. She had stopped checking her emails and texts regularly, knowing they were likely filled with either angry threats or reporters looking for a comment. But this message was different. It was from Tom Brennan. Lily hesitated before opening it, her heart racing. She hadn't spoken to Tom since the night at the bar, when he had revealed that he knew about her and Adam. Since then, she had blocked him from her life, wanting nothing to do with the man who had turned her life upside down by leaking their affair to the press. The message was short and to the point. "Can we talk? I'm sorry for everything." Lily's initial reaction was one of anger. How dare he ask for forgiveness after everything he had done? But a part of her, the part that remembered Tom as a friend and mentor before everything went wrong, was curious. What could he possibly want to say now? After a few minutes of debating with herself, she responded with a simple, "Fine." When? Lily met Tom at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. She arrived early, nervously sipping a cup of tea as she waited. When Tom finally walked in, she barely recognized him. The confident, polished political strategist she had known was gone. In his place was a man who looked defeated, his eyes hollow and his once perfectly styled hair disheveled. Tom sat down across from her, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for his coffee. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the tension between them palpable. Finally, it was Lily who broke the silence. "What do you want, Tom?" He sighed, staring down at his coffee, before finally meeting her gaze. "I'm sorry, Lily. I never meant for things to go this far." "Never meant for things to go this far?" Lily's voice rose in disbelief. "You leaked the affair, Tom. You destroyed Adam's career, my reputation. You knew exactly what you were doing." Tom flinched at her words, but he didn't try to deny them. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I was angry. I saw the way you looked at him, the way he treated you, and I couldn't stand it. I thought if I exposed the truth, things would fall apart, and you'd realize that Adam was never going to leave his wife for you." Lily's hands clenched into fists. "And you thought that would make me come running to you?" Tom looked ashamed. "I don't know what I was thinking. I just wanted you to see him for what he really was." "Well, congratulations," Lily said bitterly. "I see it now. But that doesn't change the fact that you betrayed me." Tom looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I regret it, Lily. I regret everything. I was stupid and jealous, and I let that get the best of me." Lily's anger simmered just below the surface. She had wanted this meeting to be about closure, but hearing Tom admit his jealousy only made her more furious. It was all about him, wasn't it? His feelings, his anger, his need to be in control. "You didn't just hurt Adam, Tom. You ruined my life too. I thought we were friends." Tom winced at her words. "We were friends, Lily. I was wrong. I lost sight of that, and I know I can never make it up to you." For a long moment they sat in silence, the weight of everything unsaid between them hanging in the air. Finally, Lily shook her head. "I can't forgive you, Tom. Maybe someday, but not now. Not after everything." Tom nodded, tears welling up in his eyes as he stood to leave. "I understand." As he walked out of the cafe, Lily watched him go, feeling a strange sense of closure. Tom had been a part of her downfall, but now she could finally move on, alone. While Lily and Tom had their fateful meeting, Margaret Rourke was charting a new path for herself. After months of painful self-reflection, she had come to a decision that had been brewing in her heart ever since the scandal first broke. She was leaving Washington. Margaret had spent decades by Adam's side, supporting his career and building their family. But now, with the foundation of their marriage shattered, she realized that her future no longer needed to be tied to her husband's. She had her own life to live, her own passions to explore, and she was ready to embrace them. The decision to file for divorce had been agonizing, but ultimately it was the right one. Margaret knew she deserved better than to be someone's afterthought, to be cast aside when the pressures of life and temptation became too much. Adam's betrayal had cut deep, but it had also given her clarity. Margaret's children, now old enough to understand the gravity of the situation, supported her decision. Though it was hard for them to see their parents separate, they understood that their mother needed to heal, to find her own happiness outside the confines of a marriage that had long been crumbling. Margaret sold the family home in Washington and bought a small house in her hometown, far from the political bubble that had defined her life for so long. She started volunteering at local charities, rediscovering a passion for helping others that she had once set aside in favor of supporting Adam's ambitions. For the first time in years, Margaret felt a sense of peace. The media frenzy had finally died down, and she could walk the streets without being recognized. But most importantly, Margaret found herself again. She was no longer just the congressman's wife. She was Margaret, strong, independent, and ready to take on whatever life had in store. In the months following his resignation, Adam Rourke found himself in a position he had never imagined, alone, disgraced, and struggling to find purpose. His political career was over, his marriage was gone, and the public had turned its back on him. The weight of his choices bore down on him every day. He had spent his entire life building a public image, only to see it crumble in an instant. Adam's attempts to salvage his career had failed, and now he was left with nothing but the remnants of a life he had once believed was invincible. With the investigation still hanging over his head, Adam faced the possibility of not only losing everything he had worked for, but also going to prison. His legal team was doing everything they could to fight the charges, but the evidence was damning. Adam had made mistakes, big ones, and now he had to face the consequences. The press had largely moved on to the next scandal, but Adam knew that his name would forever be tainted. He would never be able to return to politics, and any hope of regaining the public's trust was gone. But in the quiet of his new life, far removed from the chaos of Washington, Adam began to reflect on the choices that had led him here. He had been so focused on his ambition, so consumed by the need for power and success, that he had lost sight of what truly mattered: his family, his integrity, and the people he had once promised to serve. He had hurt everyone he cared about: Margaret, his children, Lily. And for what? A fleeting affair? A temporary escape from the pressures of his life? It hadn't been worth it. As the months dragged on, Adam found himself grappling with guilt and shame. He had betrayed the trust of those closest to him, and there was no easy way to make amends. But despite everything, Adam was determined to at least try. He began reaching out to his children, slowly rebuilding the relationship that had been fractured by the scandal. Though it was a long road, his children still loved him, and that gave him hope. Adam knew that he couldn't undo the past, but he could at least try to be a better father, a better person. It was all he had left. As the years passed, the media moved on, the scandals faded from the headlines, and Lily Carson began to rebuild her life. After her conversation with Tom, she had made a conscious decision to leave Washington behind for good. The city that had once represented her dreams now felt like a prison, and she needed to escape its suffocating grip. Lily moved to a quiet coastal town where she could find solace in the sound of the ocean and the anonymity of a small community. Here, she didn't have to worry about being recognized, didn't have to fear the judgmental stares of strangers. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lily could just be herself. She found work at a local nonprofit, using the skills she had honed in politics to help underserved communities. The work was fulfilling in a way that her time in Washington had never been. She wasn't chasing power or influence anymore. She was making a real difference, and that was enough. Though the scars of her past still lingered, Lily had learned to forgive herself for the mistakes she had made. The affair with Adam Rourke had been a painful chapter in her life, but it didn't define her. She had grown from the experience, learned hard lessons about trust, ambition, and the dangers of losing oneself in someone else's world. In her new life, Lily found peace. She surrounded herself with people who valued her for who she was, not for the roles she had once played in the corridors of power. And while she still thought about Adam from time to time, those memories no longer held the weight they once did. They were just that: memories, distant and fading. As the years went by, the scandal that had once rocked Washington, D.C., became little more than a footnote in the annals of political history. Adam Rourke, now living a quiet life out of the public eye, had managed to avoid jail time thanks to a plea deal that kept him out of prison but stripped him of any remaining influence or wealth. He lived in a modest home in a small town, far from the political world that had once consumed his every waking thought. Margaret had remarried, finding happiness with a man who valued her for who she was, not for her role as a politician's wife. Her new life was simple but fulfilling, a world away from the pressures of Washington. And as for Tom Brennan, he had continued working in politics, though his reputation had never fully recovered. He remained a shadowy figure in the background of various campaigns, always chasing the power he had once wielded, but never quite attaining it. In the end, the congressman's secret romance with his campaign worker had sparked not just a deadly feud, but a chain of events that destroyed lives, shattered dreams, and left scars that would never fully heal. It was a lesson in ambition, betrayal, and the cost of losing sight of what truly mattered. The story had no heroes, only flawed individuals whose choices led them down paths of destruction. But in the end, they had all learned one thing. The truth, no matter how painful, would always come to light. And when it did, the consequences were inevitable. Though the headlines had long since faded, the story of Adam Rourke, Lily Carson, and the scandal that brought them down would be remembered as a cautionary tale. A reminder that even the most powerful among us are not immune to the consequences of our choices.